Are you ever surprised by how many things can be actually like reversed when people change their diets? It's not just like, this will get you stable and you won't get worse, but the level of improvement, does that ever surprise you?
It does. It does. Yeah, it does. So like, I don't get to work with too many people with moderate stage Alzheimer's, or that sort of thing. I'm not in a neurologist's office. They don't come on my doorstep looking for help necessarily, although I do have some people with mild cognitive impairment that are in my program. What I often see is stabilization, but more often I see improvement. I see and it's funny with cognitive symptoms, sometimes the spouse or the people around them are the ones to notice the difference first. Like, you're finding words a lot better, or you did that thing and you weren't like tired, or you followed that conversation. Like, they'll point things out before the other person. If I ask them, how are you doing, they're like, it's the same. But
Yeah.
then I get their husband or wife on the group call, the live Q&A, and they're like, oh no, they found some really big words that I haven't heard them say in a long time. So it's stuff like that,
Yeah.
sometimes it
Yeah.
takes a while.
And to think also that the family member is going to be so impressed with how much better the other person is doing that they might try it themselves and notice the benefit themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the other episodes I listened to before having our chat today was an episode I did with Dr. Chris Palmer, author of Brain Energy, wonderful book.
Mhm.
I invited Dr. Nick Norwitz onto the show to interview him, and I was just kind of a participant. We also had Brett Lloyd on the show. He reversed his deep depression and suicidality on a carnivore diet, and I see both sides on this, and so I want to get your opinion and your observation as far as this goes. Chris Palmer made the point that like a ketogenic diet is not that easy. It's not easy to do. There are some situations I think that are warranted. It's maybe they don't have the education, they don't have the money, carbohydrates taste really good. And there's that one side of people that say, like, look, doing this is really, really, really difficult. Dr. Thomas Seyfried is another one I've personally pushed back on when he says, like, this is too difficult to do. A lot of people are not doing this. And I showed you before we got on the air the foot of somebody I did a consultation with 4 years ago. That foot is really nasty, amputated just this last week. And you think, like, for these people, maybe it is too hard. But Nick Norwitz answers and says, well, it's not so hard for me. And Brett Lloyd answers and he says, I eat burgers and I'm not depressed. And I do the same thing. Like, I can eat meat and just meat, and I feel such a lower amount of anxiety that's not that hard. What are you noticing with compliance on getting on this diet? Is this very, very difficult, or can this be very, very easy?
It depends on the person and what is going on for them. I just heard Chris on a podcast recently, and he said something out loud. He often does this. He'll verbalize something and I'll be like, oh yes, I'm so glad you said that. I have that experience too. But he's often the first to kind of say it out loud. And I thought it was really great. And he was like, you know, 2 weeks into the diet, he said something along the lines of, you're going to tell me this is too hard, that you can't do it, that you're just not, there's no way you're going to get better. This is not the ticket. This is not for you. This is not, in alignment with who you are and what you want or whatever. And he talked about how he tells them, look, in 3 months, you're going to tell me how easy this is. You're going to tell me that this is doable. I feel so good that maybe I could do this my whole life, or something like it, or something close to it. And he's right. That's what happens. If I have someone who's going to drop out of working with me, it's going to be within 2, maybe 3 weeks. And I think it's, that's, as Chris says in this podcast, that's when they start to miss their foods, their comfort foods. That's when they start to try to go out, or maybe their partner is bringing stuff in. They start to struggle a little bit. And so there's that. I also tell people, you're not going to have the same brain. So they find that it can be very, very difficult, but a brain on ketones works better. And that means it plans better. It isn't overwhelmed by cooking, where before it was overwhelmed by cooking. It isn't it works better. Your brain works better. Your motivation goes up. There's a change in transporter function. There's great things that happen to your brain on a ketogenic diet. And so you're not always going to be struggling to do your ketogenic diet with the same brain that you're using leading up to your ketogenic diet, trying to figure out how to reduce your carbs and what to eat instead.
Yeah.
And I always tell people having mental illness is way harder than being on a ketogenic diet. I promise you, you are already dealing with something super hard. And then they say, well, I don't want to add this on. I'm already dealing with this really difficult mental illness with these horrible symptoms. Why would I add this additional hard thing on? And I tell them, because the only way out is through. The only way out is through. If this is a treatment that's going to work for you, the only way out is through. And they will endure medication side effects that I would never put up with, that I would tell the doctor, forget you, I'm not taking this. And they see that as part of the core, right? Part of the process of having a mental illness and dealing with this hard thing. Well, a ketogenic diet is an adjustment. It's something that you have to kind of work through to get to the other side to see if it's going to be helpful for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In this episode of Chris Palmer, he already mentioned things like people are doing electroshock therapy. People are doing deep medications that have crazy side effects. People get cancer, they poison themselves and get irradiated. Like, people are already doing hard things. And one of the things that you just mentioned was one of my favorite things that I've ever heard you mention on our show, which is that it's already hard. If you're already going to the doctor to complain about some of these things, it's already difficult. Changing your eating is not going to be more difficult than what you're already doing. It's already difficult. I love that point. That really stuck with me last time. The other thing that is my absolute favorite thing to get you to do is to talk about the science behind what you mentioned before, that a brain on ketones operates differently than a brain on glucose. You are just the best at waxing poetic about ketones and the ketogenic diet. I love hearing it. Can you explain a little bit more about the science as to why this actually works in our brains and the whole rest of our bodies?
Yeah. So when we look at why ketogenic diets work, this has been used in epilepsy for a very long time, and it's the best studied diet. We really kind of understand a lot of the mechanisms that are involved. We don't understand all of them, of course. There's great research, really interesting and exciting research going on to try to figure out the rest of the pieces, but they are pleiotropic. So a ketogenic diet provides pleiotropic effects. And all that big word means is just that it doesn't just do one good thing, it does many good things, and it does it in a synergistic way with one another. That I think medications just can't touch, because those are touching like one or two kind of pathway that throws everything else off. So ketogenic diets, so the way that I think about ketogenic diets and the effects on brains, I tend to use these 4 areas: brain hypometabolism, neurotransmitter imbalances, oxidative stress, and neuroinflammation. And that's my grounding. But you could really go on in all these different directions about what ketogenic diets do. I gotta tell you, I got a great one to tell you. So I was at the 8th Global Symposium for Ketogenic Therapies in San Diego, and I was playing around in the poster sessions, reading all the posters, and I came across this poster that I got really excited about. We always talk about ketones like it's the ketones, it's the ketone level, and there is a correlation between ketone level and symptom improvement that we're beginning to see in some of these studies. I think that matters. But there's other pleiotropic effects, and this is one of them. So this guy had a poster where he was using, I believe it was fMRI, it was an MRI, and he was looking at the level of glutathione specifically in the brain in ketogenic populations. And he found a 7 to 14-fold increase in glutathione production in the brain in ketogenic populations. So that's not necessary. I don't know, maybe that's brain energy to some degree, right? Maybe it takes energy to make all that glutathione, But that is really exciting. Like you just can't get that with anything else. And for your listeners who don't know what glutathione is, that is I would say the most powerful antioxidant that your body makes in your body to clean up the hot mess that is oxidative stress and, happens with neuroinflammation. And so that is just one of the really powerful factors. And it was reproduced. So like 3 posters down, there was an animal study looking at the exact same thing, finding the exact same results. So right there in the room, you had an animal study and a human study finding the exact same thing. So, and that's just about glutathione. So there's a lot of really exciting things, but it helps with neurotransmitters. The effects on glutamate and GABA are well documented in the literature and have been in epilepsy for quite a long time. And we don't know exactly why it happens. We have lots of theories. Some say gut microbiome. Some say the brain is making neurotransmitters in a less hostile environment, right? And so it goes better, it goes well. Things change over because glutamate is supposed to convert into GABA. GABA is a chill, you got this, you feel good kind of relaxation type of neurotransmitter. And glutamate you need for learning, you need for memory. It's an important thing. It keeps your brain awake, so to speak. It's not like caffeine, but you do need it. But we have environments in which that goes way up and it becomes neurotoxic and it increases oxidative stress in the brain. So we know that one. We're less clear about the neurotransmitter effects for the other ones, but what we do suspect is happening is that it increases membrane health in the brain. So those little membranes that are supposed to fire the action potentials, that's supposed to be involved in the neurotransmitters, how they're used and their availability improves. And so we think that transporters become, or receptors become more sensitive. And that makes sense to me, really, because when we put people on ketogenic diet, suddenly their T3 goes down, but they don't have any thyroid symptoms. Their body's making less T3. Maybe they're more sensitive. Oh, their insulin goes down, right? But and so I think that these receptors in the body become resensitized on a ketogenic diet, but I don't actually have any science to back that up that I've read recently.